Welcome to Warrior Money, the show devoted to supporting our brothers and sisters. I'm Patrick Murphy.
And I'm Dan Kunze.
No guests this week. It's just us. So we figured it's a good time to share a little bit more about our own stories, from military life to jumping out of airplanes to getting into the civilian world and taking on the highs and the lows and everything in between. So kick back, let's get into it. Bottom line up front, you have this $100 million career mentality.
Yeah.
Where did that come from?
Well, first of all, it's like episode 30, and it's the first time I get to answer this question myself.
Yeah.
So I got to buy myself a second to be able to answer it. So ever since I've been a little kid, like I started working when I was 9 or 10 years old. I've always had a long range view, like a long range plan that's laid out. And I like totally agree that you can get lucky once, you might be able to get lucky twice, but sustained luckiness is only because you've planned, right? It's only because you prepared yourself. It's only because you put yourself in the right positions. It's only because you networked the right way. So I've kind of always constructed long-term, I would say, visions for myself and for my orientation. But like you set a goal for yourself. I want my net worth to be $100 million over a certain period of time. That means that I've networked the right way. It means I've invested the right way. It means I've worked the right way. And it means I've done a lot of really good things. Last week, I was so privileged to be in Napa Valley for a friend's birthday, and I just found out that some guy had a 200-year plan for his family, and I'm like, I'm not even. I gotta get to a 200-year plan now. But it's like that embedded planning process, just thinking about things over time, is why I have it.
Yeah, it's funny because I think in America we think about not even
quarters,
week,
months.
Not even like a 4-year. We got
a real time ticker above us right now.
Right, and people forget that's not how the rest of the world works.
No,
it's the Middle East or Asia. Yeah, so
no. We've got long term dynastic thinking. But
what I think is interesting is like you have this $100 million career mindset, right? And you have that even though you grew up not very wealthy, frankly, poor. No, I don't mean to be disparaging. Deliver newspapers when you're little, going to community college, really bootstrapping your way, up to live the American dream, and the Army was part of that.
Yeah,
walk us through that story.
Yeah, totally. I'll never ever say that I felt like I grew up poor because like that's just not the way that I view that at all. My parents were awesome, and they worked their butts off to get to a better life for all of us, right? That's what we were all in time to do. But they were working. They were either my mom was probably underemployed, and my dad had sporadic work, so it just was what it was. Out of necessity, when I felt out of necessity when I was 9 or 10 years old, I started a paper route. They paper out started paying me my first money, and I was like, I really like this. So like my profession now is sales, investing, and fundraising. Like I know how to do those things. So I make the joke, man, I've been asking adults for money since I was 9 years old. Like 10,000 reps came really early for me, and you want to tell me no about giving me money? Like I've heard that 100,000 times. It doesn't bother me at all. So like the starting work early, the building on this, having a longer term plan, all those sorts of things are really because I truly believe that it's an adult's job, but most specifically a grown man's job to make your family and your family's legacy better than it was before. And that's what I do. That's why I do what I do.
Yeah. And so whether it's poor, lower middle class, whatever, what I do think is that I think you and I both share that we're privileged in a sense that we grew up in America. Right.
Totally.
And it really truly can be a meritocracy now.
Totally.
Some people don't think it is, but the reality of it is if you plan your work and work your plan,
totally,
you get after it. You mentioned something though about sales and raising money, et cetera, because, there's a lot of people say, oh, I have a $20 million fund or a $50 million fund, and they don't have any money behind it. It's just like their vision, and that's fine. But you and I are venture capital partners together. We're part of two different ones that have raised over $250 million, over 200 companies. Mostly about 85% of them go to veterans. Why are you passionate about supporting our brothers to veterans to go into entrepreneurship?
I mean, so I had a really great conversation with one of the general partners that we were with last week in Austin, or 2 weeks ago in Austin. And I think of like the business principle, like there's good investments and there's bad investments. And there's really good investments, right? So like a good investment starts, and then you see that it's going to be successful, and you make more follow-on bets on it, right? Like, so I want to make good investments all the time. I'd really rather like win more than lose. Like I know you've got to lose sometimes, but I'd really rather win a lot. And the right people to win with are generally the community that we came from. Like you've done it before, community founders, or I know that you've been trained to be resilient, have grit, understand how to resolve conflict and all those great things. And that generally comes from the veteran community, or at least I've experienced coming from the veteran national security community.
Yeah.
So I think in the near term, it's just like it's a good investment. So I'm being purely selfish on that. It's a better investment than investing in other areas. That's where it comes down.
Yeah. And for those recs, there's a lot of times where Dan will be like, hey, Murph, do TSSI, invest here, invest there. And I'm like, I call my brother, all right, 5,000 here, 15,000 there. And then my son tracks, my son Jack, who's a freshman in high school, he's on the Robinhood app. Well, and I are on the Robinhood app, it's through him. And I'll be like, Dad, I think we should do this or that. And I'm like, hey, Uncle Dan, told us that.
I actually I love investing. I love being part of this whole thing. So part of that career journey was I started as an intern at the same time I was working in politics, cutting out newspaper articles. I was an intern analyst at a hedge fund when I was like 18 or 19 years old. And my job was to analyze small and micro cap stocks. So I was doing the politics thing on one side, and I was doing the small and micro cap stocks on the other side. I had no idea that was going to play off like 20 years later, but it's been the core of what my professional career has been about. Is like, how do I invest? How do I make sure I work the right places? Then how do I influence the way national security and public sector works? Like, that's what I do.
Yeah. And I love the fact that you invest now in dual use companies.
Yeah.
And you're solving a pain point when you look at World War II generation, had the veterans start their own small business. Our generation, it's less than 5%. Let me go though, because we talk about being venture capital partners, but we also do business together, especially in your previous work where it's about enterprise level sales. I could talk about, we both deliver newspapers, waited tables, all that stuff. But what about enterprise level sales? Your work at Gartner, your work at ServiceNow, and a bunch of other companies, and what you've brought to the table. And we're talking about multi-$100 million accounts that you've brought in to, say, a company like ServiceNow.
Yeah. So it's, there's an adage where if you go, the bigger the problem that you solve, the more just inherently, the more money you're going to make, or the more scale that's going to be behind it. It's just the way that it works, right? And so, what everybody gets caught up in is the end goal, like the end contract, or the end size, or the end of whatever. But like every one of those stories requires true patience and discipline to focus on the things that matter, right? So like oftentimes we get distracted by chasing the whale or chasing whatever that is, right? But when you're talking about enterprise sales, or you're talking about a good investment, sometimes the absolute best action is no action whatsoever, and to be prioritized on a few of the things that actually move the needle. Very often, and I can differentiate this at this place. Like, I know when somebody is distracted by too many different things, that they're not going to be able to focus for long enough on the thing or two that's going to really move a needle. I know it during a due diligence process. I know it in the review of a pipeline. I know it in the way that you're making investments. If you're trying to do everything all at once, you're not going to be successful. So I have had the privilege of working for some unbelievably awesome companies, and I've done very well financially at those companies. The best sales reps are the ones, or the best enterprise sellers, or the best organization growers are the ones that figure out a strategy and stay consistent over time and let that grow, which sounds very close to a $100 million career plan if you think about like just extracting that to different levels.
Yeah. All right, well, so let's flip it. Tell me about how we start working together. Tell the viewers what's your recollection of you and I working together, because we've been at this now for at least half a decade.
Yeah, I will speak. I know this specifically, and I'm not sure you remember this, but I was on the board of Big Brothers Big Sisters, and Marcus Allen, who's the guy from Philadelphia area, had just become the new CEO of the Philadelphia region. And we were at an offsite over the weekend. It was like his first kickoff session.
Yeah. And by the way, we're both on the board. We were both on the board,
Big Brothers Big Sisters. And I had a little brother for a while who's now in the army in Germany. And if you look at my clips on social media, you're going to see that Fakir Daughtry is now doing my clips. So I'm going to do a plug right there for him. But anyway, so Marcus was sitting there and he wanted us all to introduce himself. And so this hotshot politician guy named Patrick Murphy is like 3 up. He introduces himself, and then this hotshot brash 20-year-old kid in law school introduces himself. And then I wanted to finish and say something else again. He like cuts me off. And he's like, no. One thing for once. And so then we went through this weekend of things. And then we were in an elevator together, and like, I think he just like busted my stones in the elevator. And then fast forward to just before COVID, we got to see each other again in February of 2020. That's kind of when we started really starting to think about our work together. But that was, by that time, I had done my Army time. I had done the law school thing. I'd done all the things that I wanted to do.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. And I remember, many times driving up to West Point with you, doing different things. And
Actually,
I know you.
that's where the concept of this came. Well, part of the concept of this is like, how do we tell good, endearing, positive stories about veterans that aren't oriented to some sort of tragedy or some sort of problem set?
Yeah,
So.
yeah. I mean, I always boil it down because the Army says keep it simple, stupid, and I used to talk to me when they said that, right? But it's like you got to shoot, you got to move, you got to communicate. But communicate, it's part of that's distribution, and to be on this platform, I would find it's the biggest business platform in the world, and to do what we do, once that's an awesome responsibility.
Yeah, because it's like there's a lot of things you can do where you spend a lot of energy and you don't get a lot of output, right? But having the ability to have leverage where $1 turns to many, or 1 hour turns into 100 hours, or one person turns into 100,000, like that level of leverage, that level of distribution is what we're all really looking for. When there's 1.4 million serving active service members, plus all the other guardsmen and reservists, plus all the different programs, there's no way to distribute to that quantity of people unless you're on a platform that allows you to actually distribute at that scale. So and they're global, and they all have issues, and there's so many different ways. So you need scale and distribution for that.
Yeah. And tell me, we've had 30 episodes together already. We're here once a week. Tell me one of your favorite guests that we've had and the stories they told.
Yeah, I will say the consistency of everybody saying that you need to find a level of purpose, regardless of whoever the guest has been the most important, I think, message that I've heard so far. Like, no matter what we tell you in the transition, no matter what anybody tells you, no matter what you believe, finding your next step to purpose is really important. And as I reflect, on my own life, the areas I felt a little lost, or the times I felt a little lost, were when I wasn't clear on my purpose. Yeah. So it really resonates to me on that. Maurice Philogin is... I really believe in mentors, and I really believe in paying for mentors, and I really believe in doing that. Mo was one of my mentors, and I paid for some coaching years ago from him. And so the way he's constructed his life to be able to find corporate satisfaction, but also entrepreneurial freedom and creativity is really the way that I believe and I want to model myself. I believe that we're all Renaissance people, or at least we have the ability to be Renaissance people, and blending a life of public service with corporate experience, with the ability to invest, with the ability to coach my kids' baseball team is that's what I want to have. So you can have it all. And the only way to have it all is by prioritizing the right things at the right times. And that's why I really resonate with what Mo's message was.
Yeah, and that purpose-driven life, when you do keep it simple. I mean, I think you live your life, it's like God, country, family, right? And it's okay to provide for your family, whether it's a 20-year plan or a 10-year plan, but providing for them so they could have...
I tell you, I was a little chapped when I heard that somebody else had a 200-year plan. I'm like, I got to get out to 250 years. America's 250th anniversary. So anyway, so yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, so we're going to take a quick break. We're going to talk about, you have 3 kids.
We're going to talk about you next.
But why you picked me to be the godfather of your younger son.
So we're going to talk about you next.
We'll be right back on Warrior Money.
Welcome back to Warrior Money. I'm Dan Kunze with Patrick Murphy. Roles are reversed for the second segment of the show, so I'm going to do bottom line up front. All right, Patrick, everything you've done since you've been a kid is oriented in some way to public service. Why does that matter to you so much?
I just think it was ingrained. My father and mother, I'm a 3rd-generation veteran, but my dad, was a Navy enlisted veteran during Vietnam. 2 uncles served in Vietnam. My mother was a Catholic nun. I joked that she dumped Jesus for Jack Murphy. I just did a Substack on that. But it was really about taking care of our neighborhood, clean the house every Sunday before you go play sports. It was, taking care of the elderly people that shoveled their steps for free. Even though that was a side business, we did the elderly people for free. We delivered newspapers, we cut their lawns, that kind of stuff. And I just feel like that's where it comes natural to me. That is what are you doing, to live what the Bible says, having a servant's heart and giving back. And that service comes in a lot of different forms. It could come from my time in the military or political public service, or even now helping other veterans, investing in their dreams and their companies. And it's not some a lot of veterans we have to turn away, right? Yeah. Because this isn't, when I do invest and when we do invest, it's not a charity. We have to believe in them and their extraordinary leadership to get things done.
Yeah, you and I share a pretty, at least I think, share a pretty similar like origin story, right? Like blue collar folks, kind of a blue collar start, a lot of different jobs. Can you tell me a little bit about your early life and then how you got to military service?
Yeah, listen, I'm blessed to have a great family. You know, I'm the youngest of three. My sister's done now 2.5 decades as a public school teacher. My brother's Air Force, 2 deployments after 9/11 overseas, is in public safety, you know, full time. And then, you know, for me, it was you either went to church at 6:30 in the morning with my mom, or you deliver newspapers. And so
Right.
me and JJ Murphy be out there on roller skates or shopper
That's
cart.
right.
You know, we had
Yeah.
88 papers to deliver, you know,
Yeah.
before school. And, you know, to me, that was the hustle, you know. And then on Sundays, if my dad didn't have day work, you know, he'd get the station wagon and we put the papers on our roller skates because we do it even faster. And we had, I think on Sundays, we were even more, like 124 papers. But, you know, that brought me into, you know, bussing tables and waiting tables. And then even my senior year now, listen, throughout the years, I've learned, I've always been a hard worker, but working smarter is something I had to kind of learn. Um, and, you know, it probably wasn't smart for me in my senior year of high school to, you know, play hockey, but then also, you know, work 4 jobs and work the
Yeah,
graveyard
I
shift
hear ya.
on Friday and Saturday nights. You know, when you're a 16-year-old senior in high school, you shouldn't be working 11 night at 7 in the morning.
Same way.
But like, hey,
Yeah.
I didn't know any better. I was making money and it was great. And it did, frankly, keep me out of trouble. And a lot of my colleagues didn't, you know, follow that path.
Yeah. I guess I have the benefit of knowing you so well, so I get to ask a kind of an unfair, what I consider to be an unfair question. You had this unbelievable opportunity to serve in the Army and have a career that was unbelievable. West Point, you went to Iraq, you went to Kosovo, you had this awesome in-service career, right? But then what I think is unbelievable is that you were inspired to run for Congress following your time in Army service.
Yeah.
Why did you do that? Like why of all the things you could do, and you had no money, like you were broke, why did you decide you want to do that?
Yeah, I mean, well, listen, I always say to people, like, even my military career was to teach at West Point age 27.
Yeah, totally.
And then to go to combat with the 82nd Airborne Division, that was awesome. But when I was 19, when I joined the Army, I said, I want to be an airborne ranger. I want to be a paratrooper with the 82nd Airborne Division because my uncle was, you know, an 82nd Vietnam vet. And so, like, for me, like, I did airborne air assault, and then I was supposed to go to Ranger School. I didn't get the slot because I had to go to combat instead, right? So, like, that'll always chat me a little bit. But at the end of the day, it's like, I can't focus on,
Totally.
you know, and so I moved forward. For me, it's simple. I was independent my whole life. I wasn't a political science major, wasn't a journalism major in college, but to me, you know, when I was teaching at West Point and, you know, really being with the best of the best, and, you know, people forget, like, there's 55,000 high school students that try to get those 1,200 slots to West Point. And to be able to teach the next generation of leaders, it was an awesome experience and an awesome responsibility. I'm still friends with some of those students. You know,
Yeah.
we've had some of my other students on here when I teach at Wharton, you know, on the show. But I would say when I lost 19 men in Baghdad, you know, I know for the young cats that listen to our show that are still in the military, people forget, you know, our nation was attacked on 9/11 by Osama bin Laden and Al Qaeda that was based in Afghanistan. And then within 2 years, we diverted our attention to fight an unnecessary war in Iraq. Now, again, those of us who served in Iraq served honorably. We did our job, but it was a strategic mistake for America. You know, people forget we took out Saddam Hussein, who was not a great guy, but, you know, he was a Sunni leader that kept Iran, which is a Shia country, in balance. And when
Yeah.
we took off that balance, Iran
so
got
vacuum.
propped up. But, you know, when you had someone like Barack Obama come in as president, he campaigned on this. He said, if you make me the commander in chief, we're going to devote resources to bring bin Laden to justice because he was on the land for years and years and years. And we tripled the amount of forces in Afghanistan, brought bin Laden to justice. Now, we probably should have then started diverting to bring the troops home quicker than we did, but it is what it is. They're home now. But to me, that's why I got in that political public service. It's why I ran for Congress. We won by 0.6%. And I didn't know if it was going to be a 2-year gig or a 20-year gig, but I said, I'm going to make every day count.
Yeah.
You know, we did things like the GI Bill and some other stuff.
One of the cool things about being in power or having some level of power is that you can see a wrong and you can make it right, or at least try to make it right. What is the thing that you saw when you were in Congress? Like if the students at West Point compelled you to run for Congress and those things, right? what was the wrong you saw in Congress that you're like, I gotta fix this, otherwise I won't be happy about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think even in business, it's like politics. Like, what pains are you solving, right?
Yeah.
And so, at first, my first term in Congress, I served 2 terms. Was, hey, we had 16% unemployment with veterans.
How many?
16%.
Yeah,
and
that's a
people
lot.
forget that, right? So I co-authored with my roommate, the post-9/11 GI Bill, right? And now that post-9/11 GI Bill, there's 800,000 young Americans using that GI Bill right now in America today, right? So phenomenally successful. The American taxpayers got an incredible ROI on that. So I'm super proud about that. And then my second term, President Obama gets in. So my first term was under President Bush. My second term was under President Obama. And I wrote the bill that repealed the national hotel. And that pain point was, I'm straight, but we kicked out 13,000 troops just because they were gay. Not for misconduct. Misconduct, if you're gay or straight, we'll throw you out. But just because of who they loved. It was wrong. And for me, if I couldn't stand there as devout Catholic, as a Christian, as a combat veteran, the fight for those who didn't have a voice in Congress, I knew that I would be embarrassed, that my kids would read about me, on my Wikipedia page. So for me, we caught that bill, we got it done bipartisan, and to me it was important. And then it ushered in, we hit recruitment goals years later and stuff like that.
There's an adage that I have where it's just like, once you see something, you can't unsee it, right? You can't unsee the thing you've seen. That for me at least is like my growth stages in my life. Like once you start to do one thing and then you see the next level, it's hard to go back to the previous level, right? So you saw in the army a whole lot of stuff, and you're like, I'm gonna go run for Congress. And then when you're in Congress, you see a whole lot of other stuff. And then 2010 comes around, and it was I think it was 2010. It was a kind of a crazy election cycle. So then, fast forward, you had this opportunity to get called back into service again as the Undersecretary of the Army under Obama. What was that experience? Like, first of all, how do you get a call from the president to be like, yo, like you should run the Army? And then second of all, what was the job and what did that mean to you?
Yeah, when I was leaving Congress, the President Obama, who I loved, and as played basketball with him, et cetera, was one of the first members of Congress to endorse him when he was down 38 points in a primary, right, and we went on to win. But I would just say, for me, I saw him. He said, "Hey, Murph, we're finishing these next 2 years out strong. I need you to come back in." And he'd offered me a job early, and I said, "Sir, like I don't need a job. Like I'm gonna be fine. I'm going back home to Pennsylvania." But he said, "No, like this time, like I need you. Like," and so he goes, "We're making some changes in the Pentagon. I need your leadership." And so you can't say no to the president. And the next day, Dennis McDonough, who's his chief of staff, calls me and says, "Hey, Patrick," like, he goes, "the president wants you to be the Undersecretary of the Army." Dan, I will tell you, I taught at West Point. I served in the Armed Services Committee, the Appropriation Committee. I didn't know the rank structure of the Pentagon because I never served in the Pentagon, right? So I was like, is the Undersecretary bigger than the Assistant Secretary? So it goes like Secretary of the Army, Undersecretary of the Army, CCOO, and then it's like Assistant Secretary. So of course, I'm like there looking at Google Images, like the rank structure of the flow chart. But yeah, listen, we served, we hit recruitment goals, 120,000 Gen Zers in, and that was that was probably the best job I've ever had. I love every day. I mean, every day is a blessing, but that was the stand in front of formation to lead, men and women, people who are part of America's varsity team, United States Army, was a pretty awesome experience.
Let's just make sure that everybody knows this. The United States Department of Defense is the largest employer in the world. It's Fortune 1. The Army is the second largest employer in the world, and they're part of the Department of Defense, and they're Fortune 2. So that means that Patrick's budget when he was the Undersecretary of the Army was over 180 billion. Is that right?
That's right.
And he was responsible for $4.5 million in the total service members between active guard and reserve.
No, it was about 1.3 million. So about 500,000 active duty, another 500,000 in the guard reserves, and then about 300,000.
So, the 4.5 million is actually me going back to the civilian work count as well. So
right.
Yeah. Sorry about that. Okay. Hey. All right. Well, hey, I'm going to ask you one rapid fire question real quick. What is the money mistake what is the money that you know? What is the thing about money that you know now that you wish you knew when you were younger?
Yeah, I think I've always been disciplined. I didn't realize about compound interest and even putting a little away each month, no matter if you're private first class, captain, whatever. Starting early in that compound interest makes complete sense. And so I wish I did it younger. I'm doing it now. I'm making up. I'm providing for my kids. I don't have the 200-year plan, but I have a plan that I'm executing on. And I just wish I started earlier. But I've been blessed, brother, and I'm blessed to do this show with you.
Yeah,
I
that's
think
awesome.
we're changing the world. We're trying to support our brothers and sisters out there that need to get good advice.
Yeah,
and
totally.
good advice from the world's experts, and that's who we bring in every week. And it's been an honor to work with you, brother.
Awesome. Thanks, brother.
All right, so that's our show. So listen, subscribe, review We're Money on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever else you get your podcast, or find us at Yahoo Podcast or Yahoo Finance. I'm Patrick Murphy.
And I'm Dan Kunze. We'll see you again next week.
This content was not intended to be financial advice and should not be used as a substitute for professional financial services.